this feels like the real sweet spot of the entire Range Rover line in my eyes. Today I'm sitting behind the wheel of a 2022 Range Rover HSE Silver Edition in particular. And while this particular spec has me feeling a little bit like I'm a hot mom, I also can feel like I'm with my Range brother and we're running game. A Range Rover. That's a little Baby Keem reference for those of you who don't know, off the hit song Range Brothers. And on that note, if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if you want to see more content like this and help make content like this possible, please subscribe. It means a lot to me. And without further ado, let's get out onto the road. All right, so we're setting off here in the lap of luxury. Like I said, the Range Rover Sport, in my eyes, at least here in LA, is a little bit synonymous with women, younger moms driving this around, and I definitely can see why. Because one, it's an exceptionally luxurious car. It's also an attractive car from the outside, and on top of all of that, you get to sit kind of up high and have kind of a sensation that you can conquer or attack anything, you know, the road throws at you, and you don't always feel that in some more definitively sporty SUVs. As I'm setting off here, I want to break down the power plant first, which in this case is a 3-liter turbocharged 6-cylinder engine producing 355 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque. And it's no slouch. If you put your foot down, it drops a few gears here in this 8-speed transmission, and it gets going with some urgency, so you can definitely pass people with no problem. And the car handles fairly well on top of that because you have an air suspension set up in this. That also means you can lower and raise the ride height. It has certain parameters. For instance, like if you go to access height, it's mainly for super low speed or for just parking to make getting in and out of the car easier, especially for maybe those who are vertically challenged or older. But you can go up to this higher off-road height, and that, I think, after maybe 40 or 50 miles an hour will drop you back down to normal height. But the fact that you even have that, on one hand, again, going back to the capability of this vehicle, but also just, again, being able to give you that more adjustable air suspension. The car handles decently well, but also it's not a sports car. It's not even the SVR edition, for instance, that really is a performance Range Rover. That's the one to get. Even the V8 is the one to get over this, but this is a more basic Range Rover, and despite being more basic or closer to the bottom end of the spectrum, it still costs a pretty penny. In fact, as equipped, this car is just a hair over $81,000. Now, the only real main package it has is that HSE Silver Edition package, which for about $4,200 offers what the window sticker says is about $6,200 in options. So I guess it's a great value proposition, but really it does offer you some of the basic things you'd probably like to have in a Range Rover Sport. And I can't imagine driving a fully based Range Rover Sport and not having those little tiny 18-inch wheels that look really, they just get dwarfed by the larger proportions of this, you know, solid mid-size SUV. So I think 19s or 20s are kind of the minimum in my eyes, and these 21s really help make you really help enhance that aggressive stance you get here. Now, in particular, the package includes heated and cooled front seats as well as heated rear seats. You get this large pano sunroof. You get some wood treatment on the inside that's, I guess, slightly upgraded. You get the Meridian sound system, which sounds pretty solid. It's the same system that I've seen in the full-size Range Rover, and it sounds just as good, if not even better, in here. On top of that, you get cabin ionization in here, or like an air filter that allows you to purify the cabin. It's probably a little gimmicky, but I'm sure if you're driving through an area with some unruly smells, you can get rid of them, I guess, through that. It also offers you those 21-inch wheels I mentioned, as well as a refrigerator on the inside, some ambient lighting, and a few other options that really help make this feel more like a traditional Range Rover. Now, being that this is a sport model, it is in some ways the baby brother to that full-size Range Rover. I know in Europe it's called the Vogue, but here we just call it the Range Rover. And I've done a video on a 2014 Range Rover, actually a pretty popular video of mine, a little bit older, or one of my first few videos, and I can link that up here, put the card up there right here and put a link down in the description box below. But the point is that while that was a 2014 and this is a 2022, so obviously there's gonna be some natural updates just in the sense of time, they're effectively within the same generation still. That's one of the earlier, model years of this current generation, and we're slowly approaching the next generation Range Rover. And the full size will be coming out in about a year, and this shortly thereafter. So this is about the end of the, run for this gen, and I really have to say they've made some solid improvements. While I'm missing some of the little touches like that scrolly gear lever, I actually prefer this more traditional gear selector. On top of that, I love this Pivi Pro system. It's not amazing to use Range Rover's own, infotainment, as it were. I guess Pivi Pro is the name, but to use their own UI. But once you plug in your phone and hop on Apple CarPlay, it's a large screen, it's full-size Apple CarPlay, it's touchscreen, easy to reach, it's a good system. And then down below, this lower screen that's primarily for climate control and whatnot is very intuitive and very easy to use. And while sometimes I like to have just traditional dials and knobs, they've actually really nicely married the two. You have knobs for your temperature and for your fan speeds and for your volume, but then you can go in and further adjust things. And in fact, you can even change what these dials control, which is a really nice added feature. Let's pass this full-size Range Rover really quick. Oh, pull up to another full-size Range Rover, typical LA. Course. I want to shift my focus now to the exterior looks, which I already said. The car looks fantastic. I think from the front, it looks the most like a traditional Range Rover. Obviously from the sides, you have that kind of classic Range Rover Sport, aggressive, sloped kind of look. It always reminds me of like a Sunseeker yacht. I know that's so pretentious to say, but obviously a certain clientele and Range Rover clientele probably knows what that is. It's just a very sleek, it's like a ship. It's like a cool, sporty yacht. I love that. The rear, ever since 2019 with the facelift, looks super sharp, LED taillights. You unfortunately have kind of fake exhaust tips. The real exhaust is in there. It's very obviously in there, so it's a little downside, but still a chic, clean, sleek look all throughout. You have some cool vents here on the sides of the hood. You have a cool vent kind of by your front wheel well or near your A-pillar below. It's just cool little touches. And again, obviously, if you go ahead and get that V8 model, then you get bigger brakes and even bigger wheels. And if you get the SVR, you can get a carbon fiber hood and whatnot. But the point is, even here in a fairly basic example, you get a very clean, classic British look. And in fact, this whole car kind of oozes this British luxury. This absolutely fulfills that little fantasy inside my mind of being in the British countryside, obviously sitting on that side of the car, but cruising through B roads and being able to tackle, again, anything that's thrown at you. While, just like any other Land Rover product, this has some off-roading prowess and, of course, some off-roading modes to go along with that adjustable height. I think its real strength is being able to jump on a little washboard road, sand, dirt road, maybe go into the mountains where there's snow and be able to handle all of that with ease. Obviously, it's an all-wheel drive system, but this feels like the real sweet spot of the entire Range Rover line in my eyes. I'm saying that considering the fact that I haven't driven a Velar really much, but I have driven the Evoque and I have driven the full size, and I really prefer the balance that this provides. I can imagine the Velar also being very nice and probably a bit sportier, more similar or akin to a Porsche Macan, but I love that this has a third row optional. I like that it's actually a little bigger and that you do sit a bit higher up, and I'm actually surprised at how high I feel. It almost feels as though I'm sitting higher than a traditional Range Rover, and I'd imagine that it's about the same height, in fact, so that you don't get in the Velar, and I really like that here. Now, moving on to the interior really quick. I've already mentioned that the screens, and the whole infotainment is fairly nice, especially with Apple CarPlay. The gauge cluster itself, it's digital, like Drake and Future said, and it seems pretty similar to the one in that 2014 Range Rover I drove. It seems a tiny bit updated, but it's kind of like a digitalized analog gauge cluster. There's not anything super custom or modular about it. It's more just that it's a screen instead of literal gauges. Otherwise, the materials being used are fantastic. There's either real leather or kind of soft touch faux leather everywhere, which feels and looks fantastic. Space-wise, this feels very comparable to the full-size Range Rover. Again, this actually offers a third row, which the full-size Range Rover does not, surprisingly. I actually don't really think there's a whole lot that can help you discern between being in a full-size or a sport when it comes to the front, besides this gear selector. Feels otherwise very similar to me. Also, a really quick interruption to say that while I'm not the biggest fan of white on beige and in general just tan beige interiors, I do really like the chocolate accent color that kind of fills in all the rest of the gaps. It's kind of hard to see depending on the lighting, but that looks really cool, and I wish this was just all chocolate color. I think that would be super clean. But back to the video. You even have the fridge in here, which is always cool. Literally always cool if you turn it on. But it's just those little touches that help make this feel special and help it stand out from your traditional X5, Q7, Mercedes GLE, you know, some of the primary competition of this vehicle. But there are also things I don't like, which we'll get into right after a quick little tallboy test. So let's see how good this fridge really is. I don't like, or at least love, the haptic buttons on the steering wheel. It is cool that they can go all the way black when you turn the car off and seem a little sleeker, and as well, you can maybe have buttons that in certain cases can change what their use is. I've seen that in the Mercedes AMG models, for instance, but haptic buttons are always a little gimmicky, and the layout here isn't the most clear. Like the way the next track buttons are isn't super intuitive. Instead of being left and right, it's top and bottom. So you find yourself looking down and having to see where you're clicking and pressing exactly there, and that is no bueno when you're driving. I also don't love that you have a few blank switches here. At over $80,000 in a Range Rover product, this is supposed to be amongst the kings of SUVs. Obviously now we live in a world where there's the Cullinan, the Bentayga, the Urus, forthcoming Ferrari SUV, the Aston DBX, but this is still, I mean, this is, the Range Rover line is up there, right? They don't make a very affordable vehicle. Even the Evoque is in the $40,000, $50,000 range these days. So when you're talking about a car that's over $80,000, I don't love looking down and seeing some very obvious blank switches. And beyond that, the only other real complaint I have is that rearward visibility is, actually it's good on the side view mirrors, but it's not so good here with the rear view mirror. Those headrests really block a lot of that rear window, and it's not terrible, but it's not amazing, and I've seen quite a bit better rearward visibility in, say, the Audi Q7 than this. So that's something else to note. Otherwise, not much to say in the sense of complaints when it comes to the Range Rover Sport. I'm pretty happy and pretty excited to be behind the wheel of this, and if you're considering this car, aside from some of that associated vanity that comes along with it, it's not a low-key car. It stands out and it's a bit flashy, not to the extent of, say, a Bentayga, which is actually right in front of me, or Cullinan, but enough to definitely draw some attention, and you can definitely fit in with a certain type of crowd being in a Range Rover, and I'm pleasantly surprised by how nicely it drives, and the fact that despite being more base, this does offer a good amount of amenities. Now I want to try something new I've never tried before for the first time ever, called Rio's Ranks, which is my completely subjective and subject to change opinion on how a car I'm driving stacks up to some of its immediate competition. And in the case of the Range Rover Sport, I've already directly compared it to the Audi Q7, the BMW X5, and the Mercedes GLE. And I'm going to go ahead and say, as of right now, this is number one. I would, in fact, take this over the X5, the GLE, and the Q7. This just feels a little more special, has a little more presence, and it feels a bit more luxurious. I can't lie. Like having the fridge, having all the soft touch materials, and you can get them you know, you could have it so that it's all leather. Obviously in this case it's not, but having all of that and even the exterior styling, it just looks a little sportier and it looks a little more special. So I'm taking this. With all of that said, I want to say thank you guys for watching. Please consider subscribing because new videos are dropping every single week. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys want to see. I'll do my best to make it happen. And as always, this is Rio. Peace out.